Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For this video, we're going to talk about SAP Lockbox. This is actually requested in the comment section of my previous video, so I decided to create a blog post on it and record this video. We will go over the configuration, transaction codes, and I will give you an overview of H2H connectivity that is utilized with banks. An example would be HSBC. We will also discuss the basic process and we'll try to insert technical details as we go along. As always, I will link my blog post down in the description box so you can always refer to that for guidance. This is the blog post, and as an introduction, I want you guys to associate the Lockbox functionality in SAP to a mailbox that is dedicated for check payments. For the keywords or phrases that you can associate it with, you can think of check payments, payment collection, mailbox for check payments. You can also refer to this article that I linked over here for more information. Just so we're organized with the discussion, I will give you an overview. So first, we're going to discuss what a lockbox is, and then we're going to understand the purpose of a lockbox, which brings us to the question, why do companies use a lockbox? And then we're going to link it to SAP and answer the question, how do lockboxes relate to SAP? Then we're going to discuss the lockbox business process, as well as how it is processed in SAP. We will also tackle lockbox file formats for those of you who need assistance on that one. And as requested, I will cover the configuration and transaction codes, as well as the Lockbox H2H connectivity, which I mentioned a while ago over here. So what is a lockbox? Earlier, remember that we talked about, or we tried to associate a lockbox to a mailbox that is dedicated for check payments. This basically allows a company to process their customer payments quickly. This might be confusing for some. You might be asking, okay, but how does a lockbox process customer payments quickly? For this type of discussion, I want you to take your mind off SAP. And for the meantime, erase everything about SAP and visualize this lockbox as a mailbox. And now try to visualize that this box is at a bank. Here you'll see an image. So we have Bank ABC. It has several locations, so location A, B, C, and each of these banks have a specific lockbox. So we have lockbox A, B, and C. You will notice that they are residing in different locations. For example, location A could be LA. And you will also notice that there are different customers paying in different lockboxes. So we have customer 1 paying at lockbox A, customer 2 paying at lockbox B, customer 3 is paying at lockbox C. In this case, we can try to digest this image and say that lockboxes are special depository bank accounts of a company where the customers can pay or remit their invoice payments. And we're trying to build this sort of foundation or this scenario, this visualization exercise towards the question, why do companies use a lockbox? So we're trying to understand the purpose at this point. Ideally, lockboxes are strategically placed in geographical areas that are closest to their customer groups. So it is a matter of convenience for the customer and a way to minimize the mail time. One good thing to take note at this point is that in the United States, checks are the most common method of payment. So this means that lockboxes would most likely be utilized here compared to Germany, for example. This time we're going to add on to our visualization exercise and try to consider a company called Company Cool Incorporated, or CCI. Consider that the main branch is in New York, but you can consider that they have customers from different geographical areas. Expect that they have customers from LA, Chicago, Washington, D.C., so on and so forth. Now, given this scenario, the company can set up lockboxes with banks that are within the area of these customers. The company will then pay the bank for the processing of the payments through the lockbox setups. This is like an agreement with the company and the banks that, okay, I want you to set up a lockbox here in this location, location B, location C, so that the customers can pay to these lockboxes, so on and so forth. You might be wondering, what exactly do these bank employees do to process the customer payments? So we can take a look at this image over here, and you'll see that I added a processing word within the bank. This means that they simply execute these payments. Customer 1 does his or her payment in Lockbox A. Bank ABC location A will do the processing. The payments of customer 1 will be deposited to the company's bank account. And what happens next is that they create a report. They gather all of these data coming from the processed payments, and they will send the report to the concerned company. So you'll see here that after processing, they are sending reports to Company Cool Incorporated. This brings us to the next question. Now that we are introduced with an overview of how Lockbox works, we will try to link it to SAP. This time, we have another image over here, but we're going to focus on the reports that the bank gives to Company Cool Incorporated. Okay, so you can see that we have an emphasis on the reports over here, and we're technically saying that these reports are electronic files. What do they contain? They contain the payments, deposits, as well as the invoices paid against. What I mean by electronic files, it's not going to be a handwritten report or a Microsoft Word document. What the bank sends to Company Cool Incorporated would be a much more sophisticated electronic file, because after all, we're trying to shift towards a more digitalized process. This time we're going to consider that Company Cool Incorporated has SAP implemented, and these electronic files, the reports, can be sent to the company where the files can be uploaded in SAP. So it could be that the bank sends the electronic files to the accounting department of this company, or they have a more automated process or system in place, which we will discuss later on. For now, the linkage would be the reports that are coming from the bank. And these files or these reports, these electronic files, are being uploaded to SAP for further processing. I did add here that this means that you can expect these electronic lockbox files to be going inbound to SAP, where SAP in turn can update the customer balances. They can, of course, clear the customers by means of the accounts receivable. I have here the updated image. We have here emphasis on the company where we have SAP system implemented. What happens is when we upload the lockbox files or the electronic file to SAP, it tries to update the customer balances and clear the customers. One way of putting it is that the customer has finally paid and we're trying to clear the customer of that payment. Let's move on to the Lockbox business process. I have it over here. First, customers will send their checks with payment information to the bank. The bank will then process the check and payment information. Then they save the information in a file. The file is sent to the concerned company department, for example, the accounting department, using data transfer. I did also mention previously that this could be a more automated, or there could be a system in place. We will discuss that later on. Then the file Now we know that this is the lockbox file is processed and recorded in SAP. Then of course in SAP, once we're done with the processing, assuming that everything goes well, SAP posts to the incoming checks account and the paid concerned invoices are cleared. If we're looking at the lockbox file that was sent by the bank, if SAP is able to find complete payment information, it's able to locate the invoice in SAP, then definitely we have successful clearing. Whereas if the payment information is incomplete, for example, SAP cannot find the concerned invoice in the system, then you might need to do some post-processing tasks. Let's try to make it a bit more technical in terms of the lockbox process in SAP. This is another review of the process, but we're inserting more technical details into it, slowly but surely. I have here an image and we have labeled numbers like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they all have their corresponding definitions over here. Let's start with 1. Let me zoom you guys in. For number 1, we have lockbox files with the gray box. Again, payments are processed by the bank and corresponding details are stored in a lockbox file. For number 2, we have the yellow boxes. This means that, okay, the bank employees have the lockbox file or files finalized and they trigger the data transfer. What I mean by data transfer, it can be through EDI, if you're familiar with EDI or iDocs. It could be by manual input, probably, or other means. We will discuss this later on. For number 3, we have the light blue colored box labeled SAP. We're considering that the lockbox file is sent to SAP where the processing can begin. Here I'm introducing to you guys that this file is usually in the form of BAI or BAI2 format. We have several conditions or we have several considerations over here, meaning incoming files are processed manually or with an automated tool. The list of checks to be processed will be shown and can be corrected as needed. The list of checks can be printed out as needed and provided to the banks. And for those of you who are curious as to why we need to provide the information to the banks, if you're familiar with the EBS or electronic bank statements, assuming that, okay, the bank receives the information from the company and the check is cleared on the bank's side, the entry will be part of your electronic bank statement. So it goes hand in hand with the EBS process. Lastly, for number 4, we have here the light green boxes labeled batch input sessions, direct posting, and manual post-processing. Going to this 4th step, this means that after the lockbox file is processed or is uploaded in SAP, SAP is going to create the necessary check-related postings. What happens is through the SAP T code, for example, batch input sessions will be created from the check deposit lists, and they will have to be processed in SM35. Another option is that posting will be completed directly, meaning without the batch input session, through the utilization of special post-processing transactions. A while ago, I did talk about lockbox file formats. Usually, there are 2 lockbox file formats. This is the BAI or the BAI2, and this differs depending on the bank file configuration. I want to highlight the importance of testing over here. I have here a high-level comparison between the 2, and you'll notice that for BAI2, it has more details. Moving on to the configuration and transaction codes, let me zoom you out a bit. So we're going to start off with the configuration first, and the first transaction code would be OBAY. This is the control parameters for AutoCash. And this is a sample screenshot. You'll see that there's a sample input there, meaning there's a lockbox procedure and the format is specified over here. For this example, we're going to focus on BAI2. We're going to highlight that and click on more details, which is the magnifying glass button over here. Then you'll notice more settings. So you'll see that we entered the Lockbox and BAI2 selection, and we have a couple of additional settings that we can do. I have here an overview of each field. You may want to refer to this by clicking on the blog post, but to give you a high-level introduction for these three fields over here, this will not be utilized for BAI2. So since we're dealing with BAI2, we will leave that blank. For the insert bank details, we have that selected, and I did indicate some sort of naming convention over here, which definitely means that this will be the name of your batch input session. So if you go to SM35, you're done with the lockbox processing, you'll find the add bank detail naming convention in SM35. For the next configuration, it's OBAX, and this is the posting data for AutoCache with Lockbox. This is another sample screenshot, so you'll notice that there's a destination and origin column. For destination, this is the destination code the bank submits to you in your Lockbox file. For origin, this contains your Lockbox number, and if you highlight a selection and click on the magnifying glass, you'll notice more settings. So you'll notice that you need to populate necessary details such as the company code, house bank, account ID, so on and so forth, including the posting parameters. Because of course, if you're processing the lockbox and you're trying to post a document at the end of the process, you need to specify the posting parameters. So in this example, you notice that for company code, I have 0001. For house bank, we have 1234. For account ID, we have account 1. We have the GL account and the clearing account that is concerned. Then we're going to move to SPRO, and you can simply Control F and define lockboxes for house banks, or you can follow the path over here. You need to click this portion and you'll see something like this if you do the Control Find. Simply click on the first entry in area for bank accounting, and this is where you can add new entries for lockboxes. Here I tried to enter a new entry, and you'll notice that the company code as well as the house bank is similar to what was configured a while ago. One example would be company code 0001 and house bank 1234. Then I just specify the lockbox as well as the lockbox number. This is the high-level overview of the configuration. This can serve as your checklist. We're going to move on to the transaction codes for the processing. FLB2 will be the main lockbox program. I have here highlighted the programs. You can always go to SE38T code to read the source code if you're curious. You'll notice that this transaction code has this screen, and there is an entry over here that allows you to import the lockbox file. Here you're trying to enter the file path, and you're going to select the lockbox file to upload in SAP. You'll also notice that you're stating the procedure as well as the record format as seen in the configuration. So in this case, it's lockbox procedure, and the input record format is BAI2. Moving forward, you need to go to FLB1 to do some post-processing. This is a necessary step. You want to be able to check this transaction code out to ensure that everything that was processed through FLB2 finished successfully, or if there are concerns that need to be addressed through post-processing. So I did state here that this is also required when the lockbox program, meaning FLB2, was not able to auto-clear and apply all the checks included in the file. Simply put in or key in the necessary parameters or information to narrow down the search result. And in case you need more information on the post-processing of lockbox data, you can click on this SAP help document linked over here. To give you an overview of the check statuses that you can expect, we have here 4. We have applied, partially applied, on account, and unprocessed, and the meanings are stated over here on the second column. So for example, when we say unprocessed, neither the customer or the document numbers were found, meaning nothing was cleared, nothing was technically applied or on account. You need to process this manually. We're basically done with the configuration, transaction codes, the business processes, so on and so forth. And now we're going to move on to the H2H connectivity overview. So previously in the process, we discussed that the banks do a data transfer. So this is a data transfer from bank to SAP. One thing to take note of is this is not necessarily a direct connection, meaning to say that the bank will not necessarily have a direct connection to your SAP or the company's SAP system for security purposes, of course. What I mean by that, there is a concept called H2H connectivity or host-to-host connectivity. That's what it stands for, and you can basically associate this to SFTP or Secured File Transfer Protocol. Think of this as secured mails that are being sent from one system to another. In general, H2H or host-to-host is used by banks and their clients, and this would be in line with the preferred file formats, network protocols, and security standards. Again, what I mentioned a while ago was that an example would be HSBC. Let's try to look at the image over here. Let's focus on this. And notice that there are purple boxes labeled host. In the image, we have two hosts. We have the bank and we have the SAP system. In between the two hosts, you'll notice that there's a yellow box called SFTP. At this point, you'll get some sort of understanding or overview of what happens. This means that the lockbox files that are being sent from the bank to SAP, it is stored in the SFTP. So we're doing the data transfer from bank to SAP, but we're storing the files in the secured folder. In this case, I want you guys to understand that this secured folder is known by SAP and it is known by the bank. So technically, in order to communicate with one another, they should both know this secured folder. You'll also notice that I have certain boxes within the SFTP called in, archived, out, and archived. So the concept here is pretty straightforward, meaning if the bank is trying to send an inbound document or the inbound lockbox file to SAP, it will be stored in the in folder. On the other hand, if SAP is trying to send some details to the bank, it will put the file in the secured folder, but in the out folder. So this is outbound from SAP going to the bank. You might be wondering, okay, but what is the purpose of the archived folders? Let's focus on this portion first. If the bank sends an inbound file to SAP, the file will be in the in folder. Once it is picked up by SAP and is processed, this file should be copied or moved to the archived folder. So in concept, this is like your backup folder in case you need to go back on the documents. In means the files here are for processing. The same goes for the out folder and the archived, meaning to say that if the bank starts processing the files in the outbound folder or the out folder, it should be copied or transferred to the archived folder over here. One thing that I want to add before we move on to the summary is that the SFTP isn't just a secured folder. So when we're dealing with the H2H connectivity concept, you can expect other application files to be present in that server. So for example, you might see .jar files, And this basically gives you the idea that the secured folder or the SFTP needs to be able to communicate with both hosts. Again, the bank and SAP needs to know this SFTP. And so the concept is that there should be SFTP connector files in the concerned application server. In a way, those application files can be the one to move the files from the in folder to the archived or whatever tasks that need to be done in terms of the SFTP. So if you think about it, or if you try to recall our transaction code FBL2, you can link that SFTP in folder to the file path as the variant. If that makes any sense, let me show you over here. Remember our file path entry over here? You can link the SFTP in folder so it's easy for those processors to locate the document. We're finally done with H2H connectivity, and this time I'm going to give you a summary of what we discussed. What is a lockbox? Try to associate it with a mailbox that collects check payments from customers. It is a special depository bank account of the company. What is the purpose? Why do companies use a lockbox? Straightforward, it's about convenience, and we're trying to minimize the mail time. How do lockboxes relate to SAP? Basically, when the banks process the customer payments through the lockboxes, they send a file known as the lockbox file to the company. The lockbox file is then uploaded and processed in SAP. Then for the lockbox business process, we discussed that, but for now, let's have a high-level overview. Customers send their checks to the bank. The bank processes those checks and saves the details into a file. The file is sent to the company. The file is processed in SAP, and SAP does the posting proper and clearing. For the SAP Lockbox process, I did introduce the data transfer, for example, EDI or iDocs, manual input, or the H2H connectivity approach. I also introduced the batch input sessions, meaning you need to process those sessions in SM35. And if there are errors or if the checks are not fully processed in SAP, you may need to do post-processing tasks. For the lockbox file formats, we have BAI and BAI2. BAI2 has more details compared to this one. For the configuration and transaction codes, I have them listed over here. It is also part of our notepad scratch paper over here. And lastly, for Lockbox H2H connectivity, we discussed the concept of SFTP, meaning the secured folder, the two hosts, meaning bank and SAP, the connector files, the in, out, and archived folders, as well as HSBC as a sample bank. I hope you guys are able to learn from this, and I do hope this helps. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.